Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thanks so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. In today's video, I wanted to talk all about wedding venues and primarily what to look for when you're searching for your wedding venue and what makes me love a wedding venue as a wedding planner. Number one, when I'm touring a wedding venue for the first time, the main thing that I'm going to be looking at is the overall landscape, right? The overall setting. Obviously, for scenic, purposes and for photographic purposes, being able to visualize different photo locations and also how to kind of style the space. So the overall look of the venue is obviously very important. Not only the venue if you're doing an indoor ceremony and like what the inside space looks like, but the overall landscape and everything surrounding it as well. Is it wide open? Are there buildings close by in the background that are going to show up in photos or in the back of your ceremony? Stuff like that. Also, in addition to the beauty of the landscape, I also look at the terrain. So is it a lot of dirt? Is it a lot of rock and gravel? Is this going to be difficult to kind of, for one, haul things in and out on site and be able to, drive a vehicle nearby so that we can unload large items if needed? Our delivery rental company is going to have a hard time accessing the site and stuff like that. So is it going to be accessible for your guests? Are they going to be able to walk? Is the ceremony site and the reception site, if you're getting married, using both on one site? Are they nearby each other? Is there a really long walk that your guests are going to have to do from one to the other? And just overall accessibility for not only you and your vendors, but your guests as well. Number two, I always look at parking. I feel like this is something that is commonly overlooked, especially for couples that are thinking about using a private property, a family member's property or something like that. They're not taking the whole parking aspect into consideration. So this is definitely something to keep on the lookout when you're touring venues and ask if needed what the parking situation is. So ideally you want to be able to have enough parking for your guests, or at least 60% of your guests to utilize and be able to park on site if they will be having their own vehicles. If you are using a transportation company and a lot of your guests are going to be using that shuttle service, this isn't as big of an issue as you won't need as many parking spots. But definitely you want to have enough parking for guests that will need it and have that in a organized manner. Third one goes kind of hand in hand with parking, as it's often overlooked, and that is restrooms. What is the restroom situation like? Are there actual indoor plumbing facilities on site? If it's like a barn style venue, sometimes this is not the case, or you just have to bring in porta potties, or maybe there's a couple porta potties on site. And if you're having a laid back wedding and this doesn't bother you, totally fine, but it is nice to be able to have at least a couple fully plumbed functioning bathrooms, and you also want to consider the amount of bathrooms available for the amount of guests. So if you're having a wedding that's over 150 people, you're going to make sure that you will have multiple restrooms, both male and female. Electrical hookups is another thing that I always check for, especially if it's an outdoor site for your ceremony or your reception, especially if it's your ceremony. If you are getting married outdoors in a field or something like that, you want to think through and consider what the electrical hookups are going to look like, what the accessibility to this is going to look like. Are you going to be able to have a DJ come in and hook up their equipment and be able to use sound during your ceremony at your site? This also goes for inside the reception space, although it's not quite as important other than, for the similar reason of hooking up a microphone and speaker, knowing where the electrical outlets are and making sure there are plenty of them and in easily accessible areas that make sense to set up these items. Typically in an indoor venue, this isn't too much of an issue, but it's definitely something that I look at as a wedding planner, where those outlets are and how accessible they are. Another thing that I personally like in a venue is if they have tables and chairs available. And even if it's not enough for your entire wedding, if it's enough for all of your guests, all of your extra tables, your gift table, your dessert table, all of that, but having something to offer when it comes to tables and chairs is so nice at a venue, because not only does this eliminate an extra vendor that you have to coordinate with, but it also helps on the day if you're trying to coordinate deliveries, and that way you're not waiting on a rental company to deliver tables and chairs before you can start the setup of anything else. Additionally, not having to pay that delivery fee from another rental company to deliver those items. And also, a lot of times, if a venue does provide tables and chairs, they also will provide a service that will set them up for you. So this just makes it so much more smooth on the day of your wedding as far far as setup goes, and it makes things a lot more streamlined, one less vendor to communicate with, and it's something that I find to be very helpful in a venue. And finally, are there venue hosts or managers that will be on site? Some venues will have somebody that serves as like a manager, and sometimes this is the venue coordinator, venue host. There's different names for different venues, however they name them. But basically this is an individual that's going to be on site at the venue for the duration of your wedding. So whether they are, very hands-on and coordinating with the venue, which I just did a video on venue coordinators versus day of coordinators. So if you're unsure of what the difference is or what I kind of mean by a venue coordinator, definitely check that video out. But basically having somebody on site, whatever capacity that may be, to handle anything that comes up venue related. So let's say there's an issue with the restrooms, or there's an issue with a light fixture or something like that. Having somebody on site that can handle those things is something that is very helpful in a venue. And not only that, but as a wedding planner or day of coordinator, it's nice to know that not everything is going to fall on me. So I've been to weddings where, there was no manager on site for the venue, things go wrong with the venue, like the restrooms, something like that. And technically that is not my job, but when something goes wrong, there needs to be somebody to go in and fix the problem, right? And a lot of times that ends up being a wedding planner or a wedding coordinator because there's no one else to do it. So this is definitely something that I look for in a wedding venue. Depending on what you're looking for in a wedding venue, there's so many different styles out there and things that make a venue a great one. These are just a handful of things that I look for personally as a wedding planner when touring wedding venues, and things that I love in a wedding venue. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.